The flashing red and blue lights painted the night in an eerie glow as Dr. Malcolm Hayes stood frozen on the sidewalk, his hands raised. His heartbeat pounded in his ears, but he forced himself to stay calm. "Get down. Hands behind your head," one of the officers barked. Malcolm hesitated for only a second, just long enough to part his lips and try to explain, but before he could utter a word, a rough hand shoved him to the ground. His white coat flared behind him as his knee scraped against the pavement. "I didn't shut up." The officer pressed a knee into Malcolm's back, yanking his hands behind him. The unmistakable chill of handcuffs bit into his wrist that a small crowd had started to gather. A woman gasped. "He didn't do anything." "What's the charge?" Malcolm gritted out, wincing as his face was forced against the concrete. "We got a call about a suspicious black male attempting to break into a vehicle," the officer sneered. "And you matched the description." Malcolm turned his head as much as he could. His car, a sleek black BMW, sat only a few feet away, his medical ID badge resting on the dashboard. "This is my car," he said through clenched teeth. "Sure it is," the second cop scoffed. The growing murmurs from onlookers filled the air. "That's Dr. Hayes," someone called out. "He's a surgeon at the hospital." The first officer hesitated, his grip loosening just slightly. "He's a doctor?" Before the officer could fully process the words, another voice sliced through the chaos. "What the hell is going on here?" The crowd parted as an older man in a suit stormed toward them. His face twisted in fury. It was Mayor Richard Hayes, and his eyes were locked onto his son, lying in cuffs on the ground. The air grew thick with tension as Mayor Richard Hayes stepped forward, his polished shoes clicking against the pavement. The officers immediately straightened, their confidence wavering as they recognized him. "Let him go," the mayor commanded, his voice dangerously calm. "Sir, we were just..." The first officer stammered, his face paling. "Just what?" Richard snapped. "Tackling a man to the ground without asking questions? Handcuffing a well-respected surgeon because he was standing near his own car." The second officer shifted uncomfortably. "We receive a report about a suspect breaking into a vehicle." "He fit the description, did he?" The mayor folded his arms. "Or did you just see a black man near a nice car and assume the worst?" Malcolm sat up slowly, flexing his sore wrists. His suit jacket was wrinkled, and his ID badge glinted in the flashing lights. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. The weight of the moment was pressing down on everyone present. The first officer gulped. We made a mistake." "A mistake?" The mayor let out a humorless chuckle. "No, gentlemen, a mistake is forgetting to turn off your headlights. This was racial profiling. This was an abuse of power." The crowd watched in silence. Some had their phones out recording. The officers glanced at each other, sweat beading at their temples. The mayor turned to Malcolm. "Are you all right?" Malcolm exhaled sharply and nodded. "Yeah, Dad, I'm fine." "You sure?" "Because I'm not." Richard turned back to the officers, his expression unreadable. "I want their badge numbers. Now." Their hands shook as they retrieved their IDs. The mayor snatched them up, his grip tightening. "We'll see how you like being judged unfairly when you're standing in front of a disciplinary board." The first officer's face turned ghostly white. "Sir, please, save it." The mayor put a protective hand on his son's shoulder. "This city doesn't belong to people like you," he said coldly. "And I'll make damn sure you never do this again." The officers stood in stunned silence as the mayor and Malcolm walked away, leaving them to face the weight of their actions. By the time Malcolm and the mayor arrived back at City Hall, the footage of the arrest had already gone viral. Social media was ablaze with hashtags like hashtag Dr. Wildblack, hashtag Son of the Mayor, and hashtag Justice for Dr. Hayes. News outlets scrambled to confirm the story, while citizens flooded the mayor's office with calls demanding accountability. Inside the press room, Mayor Hayes stood at the podium, flanked by Malcolm and the city's legal counsel. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions, and the room buzzed with anticipation. Richard raised his hand, silencing the chaos. "I won't be taking questions yet. First, I want to make something perfectly clear." He paused, locking eyes with the crowd. "My son, Dr. Malcolm Hayes, a Harvard-educated trauma surgeon who has saved countless lives in this city, was racially profiled, harassed, and arrested by the very officers sworn to protect him. Why? Because of the color of his skin. This isn't just about my son. It's about the countless people who don't have a mayor for a father, whose voices go unheard, whose rights are violated in silence." Murmurs filled the room. "As of this moment," Richard continued, "the two officers involved have been placed on immediate administrative leave pending investigation. The department will undergo an internal audit of its arrest protocols, and every single officer will be required to attend a comprehensive racial bias training program. Effective immediately." He glanced at Malcolm, who stood tall beside him. "Let this moment serve as a turning point. We are not just going to speak about change, we're going to lead it." A standing ovation erupted from the back of the room. Malcolm remained composed, though the fire in his eyes said everything. Later that evening, Malcolm sat alone in his apartment, watching news segments replay the footage on loop. Despite the public outcry, he couldn't shake the memory of being shoved against his own car, hands scraped on the pavement. His phone buzzed. Another message from a young black doctor thanking him for speaking out. Maybe, just maybe, something good would come out of this. The morning after the press conference, Malcolm awoke to a wave of messages from friends, colleagues, patients, and complete strangers. One message stood out. A nurse from a hospital across the city wrote, "Dr. Hayes, I've worked in this field for 20 years. I've seen what they did to you happen too many times to people who couldn't speak up. But you did. Thank you." The words hit him deep. Later that week, Malcolm returned to his hospital shift. As he entered the ER, the usual controlled chaos paused for just a moment. Nurses clapped. Fellow doctors gave him nods of respect. Even the janitorial staff gave him a quiet thumbs up. The man who had been thrown to the ground and handcuffed in public now walked with renewed purpose. But Malcolm knew his work wasn't over. That weekend, he accepted an invitation to speak at a town hall on police reform and racial bias in healthcare. The room was packed. Community members, fellow professionals, city officials. Even local law enforcement was present, many of them visibly uncomfortable. He took the stage and looked out at the crowd. "I'm not just here because I'm the mayor's son. I'm here because I'm every person who's ever been told they didn't belong, despite doing everything right. I wore a white coat, saved lives, paid my taxes, and still I ended up on the ground in cuffs, humiliated." He let the words settle. "I'm not looking for revenge. I'm looking for accountability. We can't heal a community when its systems are sick. And we can't move forward until we face the truth about why this keeps happening." A silence followed. Thick, heavy, reflective. Then a slow clap began from the back. More followed. Within seconds, the room erupted into applause. Malcolm stepped back from the podium, heart pounding. Not from fear, but from hope. For the first time in days, he smiled. This wasn't the end of his story. It was the beginning of a movement. Later that evening, Malcolm sat across from his father in the mayor's private residence. The mood was quiet, tense. Mayor Harold Hayes, a man known for commanding rooms and silencing arguments with a single look, seemed unusually quiet. Malcolm sipped from a glass of water, then broke the silence. "You've barely said a word since the town hall." The mayor looked at him over his glasses. "You were good, poised, powerful. That's not what I asked." Harold sighed, leaning back in his chair. "You don't think this is hard for me? Watching my own son be treated like a criminal? You think I didn't want to drive down there myself and tear those officers apart? You're the mayor. You could have made sure this never happened. And you think I haven't tried?" Harold's voice rose, then steadied. "I've spent 25 years trying to change the system from the inside. But every time I push, they push back harder." Malcolm leaned forward, voice low and calm. "Then maybe it's time you stop playing nice." The mayor studied him. "You're not just my son," he said. "You're becoming something more. You have the voice, the people's attention, and the moral authority. Maybe, just maybe, you're the one who can say the things I no longer can." Malcolm sat back, the weight of his father's words sinking in. "Then I'll need your support," he said. "You have it," the mayor replied. "But make no mistake, this path won't be easy. They'll come after you, your career, your reputation." Malcolm nodded. "Let them try." They sat in silence again. Two generations, two fighters, bonded by blood and purpose. The next morning, Malcolm awoke to find his face plastered across every major news outlet. "Wrongfully arrested doctor is mayor's son. Doctor or criminal? Racial profiling in broad daylight. Mayor's son speaks out, calls for police reform." His phone buzzed nonstop. Calls for media houses, podcast hosts, activists, even celebrities reposting his speech on social media. The video of the arrest had gone viral, racking up millions of views. But fame, Malcolm quickly realized, was a double-edged sword at BYNoon. The hospital's board of directors summoned him for an emergency meeting in the sleek boardroom, surrounded by polished executives and stiff suits. Malcolm felt like prey. Dr. Eleanor Briggs, the board chair, spoke first. "We appreciate your contributions, Dr. Hayes," she began, her voice clipped. "But we're concerned your recent publicity may be a distraction." Malcolm's eyes narrowed. "A distraction? You mean standing up for myself after being wrongfully arrested?" "There are donors expressing concern," another board member added. "They're worried about the hospital being caught in political crossfire." Malcolm leaned forward. "So you'd rather I stayed quiet? Let it blow over? Pretend it didn't happen?" "We're simply asking you to consider the hospital's image." Malcolm stood slowly, placing both hands on the table. "Let me be clear. I'm not going to be silent to make rich donors comfortable. I save lives here. I bring compassion and care to this hospital every day. And if that's not enough for you, then maybe you're the distraction." The room fell silent. No one dared respond. "I'll be in the ER," Malcolm said, walking out by the time he returned to his department. Several nurses stood and clapped quietly. One handed him a note. "Thank you for standing up. We've got your back." The distant wail of sirens grew louder. Then suddenly, they stopped, right outside the precinct. Officers turned toward the windows as a sleek black SUV came to a halt. The mayor's emblem glinted on the vehicle's license plate. The station fell into an eerie silence. Out stepped Mayor Evelyn Carter, tall, composed, and radiating an air of authority that made even the most seasoned officers straighten up. She didn't wait for an escort or an announcement. She stormed through the precinct doors like a force of nature. "Where is my son?" she barked. Heads turned. Mouths fell open. Captain Riley rushed forward, sweat already forming on his brow. "And Mayor Carter, we had no idea. I asked you a question, Captain," she said, her voice razor sharp. "Where is my son?" Dr. Julian Carter was being escorted from holding when the mayor saw him. His shirt was wrinkled, a scrape on his cheek, and his wrist still bore the faint marks of the cuffs. The moment she laid eyes on him, her expression changed from fierce authority to pure maternal fury. "Julian," she gasped, rushing to his side. "Are you all right?" He nodded, exhausted. "I'm fine now." She turned to the stunned officers and pointed at the captain. "You arrested a medical doctor with no warrant, no probable cause, and used force? You'll be answering for every second of this outrage." Captain Riley opened his mouth but couldn't form a sentence. Julian looked over at the arresting officers and said, "You wanted to know who I was? I'm the son of the woman who funds your department." Silence. Mayor Carter turned to the press, who had begun to swarm the precinct. "You want a headline?" she said coldly. "Here it is. A black doctor saving lives in this city is profiled and arrested for walking to his car, while his white colleagues went untouched." That ends today. The following morning, every major news outlet had the story. Headlines screamed, "Mayor's son, a respected black doctor, wrongfully arrested. Racial profiling scandal rocks police department. Mayor Carter demands full investigation in his son's arrest." Clips of Mayor Carter's fiery statement played on a loop. Social media erupted. Hashtags like #JusticeForJulian and #ProfileNotProtected trended worldwide. Prominent figures, activists, doctors, and even celebrities chimed in, demanding accountability. Inside the hospital where Julian worked, staff gathered in support. Nurses, fellow doctors, even patients held up signs. "We stand with Dr. Carter. He heals, not harms. Profiling has no place in our city." Julian, still shaken but determined, stood on the hospital steps with his mother beside him for a press conference. "I've worked my entire life to save lives," he said, voice steady. "I've trained in the most intense conditions, and I've shown up for this city every single day. And yet, in a single moment, I was reduced to a thread, just because of the color of my skin." He paused, scanning the crowd of cameras and reporters. "This isn't just about me. It's about every person who's been stopped, harassed, or hurt simply for existing in their skin. Enough is enough." Mayor Carter stepped forward next. "This is more than a personal incident. It is a systemic failure. And I promise you, reform is coming. Starting today." The crowd roared in applause. Julian looked to his mother, eyes full of both gratitude and purpose. The city wasn't just watching. The world was. Later that afternoon, the mayor summoned Police Chief Reynolds to City Hall for an emergency meeting. The press wasn't allowed inside, but whispers of tension and accountability swirled around the marble corridors. "Chief Reynolds," Mayor Carter began, standing at the head of the long oak conference table, "explain to me how two of your officers didn't recognize my son, a well-known trauma surgeon, and instead treated him like a criminal. The chief shifted uncomfortably. "Ma'am, I can't defend what happened." The officers claimed he matched a vague description. "Vague," she repeated. "That's always the excuse. Vague means any young black man becomes a suspect. That ends now. We've already placed both officers on administrative leave pending investigation." "Not enough," she interrupted. "I want a full department review. I want accountability and retraining on racial bias. And I want it implemented before the end of the month." Reynolds gave a slow nod. "Yes, Mayor Carter." She leaned in. "You have my support if you're ready to make real change. But if you can't lead that charge, I'll find someone who can." The meeting ended with silence, the weight of transformation hanging in the air. Across town, Julian received a call from his father. "Your speech was powerful," the mayor said quietly. "You may not have run for office, but today you led." Julian smiled faintly. "I didn't want to lead. I just wanted to be treated like everyone else." "Sometimes," the mayor replied, "change chooses you, whether you want it or not." That night, the city's skyline shimmered under protest candles and peaceful marches. And in homes, offices, and precincts, a conversation had started that wouldn't be silenced again. Julian hadn't expected the video to go viral. But within 48 hours, it had over 6 million views. News outlets across the country picked up the story. Black doctor arrested. Turns out to be mayor's son. Respected surgeon wrongfully detained sparks nationwide outrage. City reforms police policy after doctor's public arrest. Talk shows debated the incident. Politicians weighed in, and activists called for broader systemic change. Julian, once hesitant to speak, now found himself at the center of a national movement. He appeared on morning shows and podcasts, not as the mayor's son, but as a voice for dignity and reform. Always calm, always poised, always focused on solutions. "I'm not here to villainize officers," he told one interviewer. "But accountability is not anti-police, it's pro-justice." Even some within the force started reaching out to him, thanking him for his perspective, admitting the system needed work. At the TA community event held in the city park, Julian stood with his mother on stage. Hundreds gathered, holding signs that read, "Doctors deserve respect. Protect, not profile. Change starts now." He raised the mic. "This isn't just about me. It's about the countless others who don't have a mayor for a parent. It's about ensuring no one else has to prove their worth before receiving respect." Applause thundered. His mother, eyes glassy with pride, stepped forward. "This is why we lead, not just to make laws, but to make lives better." And in that moment, Julian wasn't just the son of a mayor, he was the face of a movement. Julian didn't expect to see them again, Officers Peterson and Clark. But a month after the incident, at the invitation of Police Chief Ramirez, he stood before a room of uniformed officers, the very same precinct where it all began. "This isn't about shame," the chief had told him. "It's about growth." Julian took a deep breath and began. "I'm not here to attack anyone," he said, scanning the faces in the room. "I'm here because I believe that even when we fall short, we can rise better together." Peterson and Clark sat in the front row. Their expressions were unreadable. Julian continued, "I understand fear. I understand instinct. But assumptions based on race have consequences. I lived one." A long silence followed. Then, surprisingly, Officer Clark stood up. "I was wrong," he said, voice low but firm. "I saw what I wanted to see, not who you were." Peterson stood next, shoulders stiff. Me too. I I apologize, Dr. Carter. We let our bias take over our duty. Julian nodded, acknowledging their words. I don't want your jobs. I want your hearts. We can't heal what we refuse to face. The room was still, and then applause. From the officers, from the chief, from the staff watching through the glass. That day, Julian did more than speak, that he began changing minds from the inside out. Julian's speech at the precinct made headlines again. This time, not for outrage, but for inspiration. The mayor, his father, invited Julian to speak at the City Hall's Justice Reform Panel, where he was introduced not just as a doctor, but as a citizen who turned pain into purpose. In front of a packed auditorium, Julian spoke again. Accountability doesn't mean vengeance, he said. It means acknowledging harm and committing to do better. The city listened that a new community initiative was launched. Bridges Not Barriers, co-led by Julian, aimed at training officers in empathy-based engagement, hosting regular forums between law enforcement and local residents, and providing scholarships for youth pursuing law, healthcare, and public service. Officer Clark joined one of the panels voluntarily. Peterson, too, signed up for continued training. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. Julian's hospital, once just a place of healing for bodies, now opened its doors to conversations about healing minds, communities, and systems. And through it all, Julian remained grounded, not in bitterness, but in hope. Hope that a city could grow, that people could learn, that the next young black man walking down the street wouldn't be a threat, but a neighbor, that a leader, that a healer. Just like him.